to the ninth and the continuing of shiurim on the Yud Gimel Midos Shater Nidreshes Bahem, the ninth lecture in the continuing series of the 13 hermeneutical principles through which the scripture is interpreted. At the end of last week's shiur, we spoke about Rabbi Akiva. And we spoke about the fact that Rabbi Akiva, evidently, both from what Chazal say regarding him in general, and also from the machlokes dispute we saw between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel regarding the klal to klal. Rabbi Akiva darshans a riboy miut riboy. It would appear that Rabbi Akiva, in a certain sense, as we explained it, collapsed the Midos from what you would say using abstract principles to, in fact, uncovering the oral law from every little detail of the Torah Shabbat. In other words, Rabbi Akiva is the, as Chazal say, Menachas Chavtesim Abeis, is Deresh Kisrei Oisias. In other words, and this we saw last week was the meaning of that which Rabbi Akiva says both in Lamed Zayin and in Masechah Sotah, and also another place in Sham Mishkalim, that Rabbi Akiva says that the klolos, Chotim and klolos were given at Sinai. Namely that every detail of the oral law, or every detail of the written law, expresses part and parcel of the oral law. So as for Rabbi Akiva, as we saw in Bechilta too, the oral law and the written law are indistinguishable. And that's how we learned the Sifroa, Teres Kahanim, at the end of Chukoisai, that Tana Kama, which I wanted to identify as Rabbi Shmuel, Darshan Es HaTeres means that the Torah Shebaksav and the Torah Sheb'al Peh. There are two Torahs. And Rabbi Akiva asked the question, you tell me there are only two Torahs, so Torah Sa'ila, Torah Shlamim, there are many Torahs. But namely, the fact is that Rabbi Akiva understood that there isn't a written law and an oral law, and the bridge between them is an absolute set of logical principles necessarily. Rabbi Akiva also is money to the Midas, but that every aspect of the written law gives expression to the oral law. For Rabbi Akiva, the written and oral law are actually one and the same, and that was the machlokes in the Mechilta, in Pashas Yisrael, Vayu Abbas HaKolos. So Rabbi Akiva says, Roas Hanira, Roas Hanishma v'Shomas Hanira. So according to Rabbi Akiva, Ri and Shmiya are actually the same capacity. They're the same function. Ri meaning the Torah Shebaksav, Shmiya meaning the Torah Sheb'al Peh. For Rabbi Akiva, Torah Sheb'al Peh at the oral law at the time of Sinai were one and the same. And then even after that, while there is a seeming bifurcation, since the Kolalim are given at Sinai as well as the Pratim, one can ultimately recover all of the oral law from the written law itself, and that's called Deresh Kisei Oisias, not necessarily through abstract Midas, which postulate, which posit a distinction between oral and written law, but rather it's all one and the same. That's the sheet of Rabbi Akiva. Okay, that's a summary of shiur number 8. Now, but Rabbi Akiva is more radical. I'm going to reveal this evening, this afternoon, whatever part of the globe you're on, that Rabbi Akiva is actually more radical. And I want to begin with the Rambam. The Rambam says, in Hilchos Mamrim, Perek Beis Halacha Aleph, says the Rambam, Bezdin HaGodol, we're speaking about the Bezdin HaGodol that's out in the Lishkas in Yerushalayim, in the Beis HaMikdash, Lishkas HaGozes, which he speaks about in Perek Aleph, says the Rambam Perek Beis Hilchos Mamrim Halacha Aleph, Bezdin HaGodol, Shadoshu Ba'achas Min HaMidas. Bezdin HaGodol, that used one of the Midas, Kefi Mashinira Beinayim, in other words, they darshed one of the Midas in accordance with how they understood to interpret the Torah. Shadin Kach, V'den Udin. In other words, they used one of the Midas in order to come up with a halacha from the Torah Shebaksav, and they, in fact, they ruled according to that law. It goes on and says, V'omer Aleim Bezdin Acher, another Bezdin. The next generation, the generation after that, comes along, and this Bezdin disagrees. They find a reason that they can argue on the din that's derived used from the Midas of the first Bezdin. Those Bezdin number 2 comes along, and argues or takes issue with the din that's learned by the first Bezdin using one of the Midas. So says the Rambam, Paskas the Rambam, Hareza Saisa. So the second Bezdin has Rishus, has permission to argue and overturn and overrule the din of the first Bezdin. And the second Bezdin can rule and use, in other words, so for example, if someone uses a meter in one way, someone come along and use the meter another way. Or use another meter. Okay? Shenema, like it says, Ela Shefet Ashir Yebayam Mahei. So the Rambam quotes the pasuk from Parshas Sheftim. You should come to Shef Yebayam Mahei. Ein atachai b'lechas ela acha bezin shebadei. And of course, shebadorcha. So the Rambam says you go by the Sheftim your generation. That's the meaning of the pasuk. Right now, this is of course we're speaking about a bezdin that uses one of the a logical hermeneutical principle, right, to derive halacha. Of course, if the bezdin makes a takana, that's something different. The Rambam speaks about that in Halach of the Beis, and that you need godel b'chok with a minyan. That's a separate issue, a separate shiur, a separate series of shiur. We're not going to go into that right now. Now, this is a little bit of a shocking thing. I mean, how can one bezdin overturn the drasha of another bezdin? If the drashas, if you believe, if the drashas are in fact halacha mishmi Sinai, come from Sinai, so how can another bezdin overturn a previous drasha? I don't want to go into this right now, but let's accept the Rambam kipshutai. The question is, what is the makor of the Rambam? Where did the Rambam get this? How did the Rambam know that the second bezdin come along and overturn the drasha of a previous bezdin? Right? Certainly, according to the Rambam, Parshas Mishnayos, right? We know, and it's much true in the Hakdama of Mishna that there were drashas that were generated after the, in other words, after the time of the, after Hasina.
But this is in the Hakdama?
This is in the Rambam Hakdama Parshas Mishnayos. The Rambam says only halachos mekubalos, right? Our halacha should be Sinai. But the Rambam says any place where there's a machlokes, the Rambam Sheri Sheni too in the Sefer Mitzvahs indicates that drashas the Rabbanim mean doesn't mean the Rabbanim that in the Raisa, but the Rambam clearly indicates there that there are many drashas in Chazal. Rambam was saying most drashas in Chazal were actually generated later on after Sinai. Those of you who are interested in this, I refer you to the Rishimo issue, the first issue of Rishimo. There I speak about the Shoshei and the Rambam. But I don't want to. That's not the point what I want to get into right now. But in any case, the question is, where did the Rambam get this? What is the makor of the Rambam? Where did the Rambam? So in other words, I think in the case of Mishna, he wants to claim, and the Rambam, that of course, the Rambam got this because we see that later Marayim argue on earlier Marayim. I think he wants to say maybe that Tanayim. That could possibly be, but that's not. I don't think that later Marayim or earlier Marayim is a raya that you can overturn a drasha. The Marayim didn't make original drashas, so it doesn't. In other words, I don't think that. But now I saw in the Yosameach. Actually, I saw many years ago. Actually, Yosameach, and that's why I'm bringing this tonight. The Yosameach wants to bring a raya from the famous Gemara in Hillel and Bnei B'Seima that we spoke about. We actually began this series of shiurim with the Gemara in Psachim, Daf Samach Vav Mud Aleph, and there was a issue that arose during the time of Bnei B'Seima, who was the Gedolei Hador at that time, as in the Sanhedrin, right? If Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbat, you be called Pesach.
This is also numbering 2-1?
This is...
Also Me'ach and Hilchos.
Oh, right. Also Me'ach, Peri Beis Halach Aleph, and Hilchos Mamre. Right. So the also Me'ach says, right? Muchach de Bedova HaNidresh B'Midos. It's clear, and of course I bring for Yosameach. I have a Kabbalah from my Rebbe, is that the last Jew to absolutely no Mamish Kotel and Kula was in Tzir. But he says it could possibly also that it's not the Yosameach. But certainly the Yosameach is the person who I would expect to find the Makom in Shas. So Yosameach says, Muchach, the Madama Nidus Ramida, Sheish Chos Bezdin Hakotel Lachlok Al Godel Hakoyba. In other words, it says the Yosameach, it's clear that even a Bezdin Kotel, as opposed to the Gzeres, the Takadosh, the Godel Hakoyba, but a smaller Bezdin can argue with a greater Bezdin in a previous Bezdin, even one of the Midas. So says the Yosameach, V'lachach Asi Shabbat Mashadanu in Bezdin Dechah Shabbos. And that was the whole discussion, whether Pesach is Dechah Shabbos, the Gemara in some of Vav Mud Aleph and Psachim. Hagan de b'chol hazmanim shchicha Pesach b'Shabbos. Right? So, even though there were many times before that in history that Erev Pesach fell on Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah was Shmuel. He was saying they forgot the Shmuel, or whatever it is, right? The Savut is an ilma Midos Shatit HaTorah Rosh Behem, U'kamod the Dan Hillel, B'tchila v'lem hayu tshuvas harvei, v'mkein yachol hein l'chlok al ha'kadmonim. In other words, Hillel made a drasha, and they started arguing with him. Until Hillel said, Mipi Shmuel I heard Mishmai v'Yavtalia.
So Hillel was saying this.
Hillel made a drasha, and they started arguing with him.
What was the previous?
I don't know. I guess Pesach was always like a Shabbos. It was also about Kim Bring that Hillel was overturning a previous Pesach because the Minhag of Israel was the Pesach of Shabbos. Somehow they forgot the Shmuel.
So they wanted to overturn.
They wanted to overturn, right? The whole Gemara, something else. Piece about they shut him up until Hillel says, right? I have a Kabbalah Shema we have tell you. So the Sameach wants to claim that we see from his that a smaller Bezdin can overturn a larger Bezdin. Because Bezdin lower than Hillel. Although we really never understand what the Sameach is. Hillel wasn't a Bezdin. Anyway, Chas v'Shalom, I don't say Shvach HaMaisim, but the Sameach wants to bring a raya that until when Hillel said the Shmuel Mishmai v'Yavtalia, then he had a Kabbalah, then that was nothing but quiet. It was Mashu you could argue on the Midos.
So why should a Kabbalah be?
I don't know. That's what the Sameach says. Ayin or Sameach, that's what he says. Okay? I'm not going to be Miyash of Yosameach, but that's the Yosameach wants to bring a raya. Okay? Okay, now, it makes a reference, so it's not important. But what is the Makor of the Rambam? I want to claim the Makor of the Rambam, and I'm not sure I really understand the Yosameach, you know. I mean, Chas v'Shalom, I don't want to dismiss him, but I want to say there's another more explicit Makor in the Rambam. And there's two brises in Shas, and they both involve the same person, Rabbi Akiva. There's a Gemara in Samach Daled Amud Beis in Shabbos. It's the sixth paragraph in Shabbos, Bama Isha, Samach Daled Amud Beis. And the Gemara brings a brisa, V'hodva b'nidasa. Right? V'hodva b'nidasa. Which means, Ephes, the Mashmah says that, right, Zekenim Erishenim Amru. What does it mean, V'hodva b'nidasa? Zekenim Erishenim Amru, the first Kenim said, Shaloi Titchol, that a woman is a nida, shouldn't, I guess, paint her eye, V'loi Tifkois, you shouldn't, I guess, paint her face, V'loi Tizkasha, you shouldn't wear jewelry. The big day Tzavainim, and she shouldn't put jewelry on colored clothes. And Rashi explains why. It says Rashi, Hayudosh and Rishayim, Kamashmal. The Rishayim in the early generations understood the pasuk, which according to Rashi was the apparent meaning of the pasuk. Kedav hamanuda or machika mibayla. The need is supposed to be someone who's sort of like removed from her husband. This is from her husband. In fact, actually, the Gemara says, I think Chavof Banal from Rosh Hashanah, my nida galmuda, that she's removed from her husband. So she's not supposed to put up makeup. She's supposed to not look nice. And the Gemara says, Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva, until Rabbi Akiva came, V'lim, and he taught, Im kein atam gan al baila. If you tell a woman's a nida, that she can't put up makeup, she can't wear nice clothes, then she'll be ugly in front of her husband. Her husband, she'll look terrible in front of her husband. But then it's a baila magasha. Her husband will divorce her. Elama talmud loy mevadva b'nidasa. What do we learn from the pasuk of Nidasa? B'nidasa teya ch'tofa b'mayim. She's a nida, she goes to the mikveh. That's what Rabbi Akiva learns. And look at this interesting how we have the Yavitz. The Yavitz says, what does it mean? That the Yavitz says in the early generation they were, I guess, less physical. They were less concerned with how their wives looked. And later generations, people were more concerned with how their wives looked, so therefore came Rabbi Akiva. But what do we see actually about Rabbi Akiva? No, the Yavitz says in the Hagoys. This is the back of the Shas. What do we see? Before Rabbi Akiva, came Rabbi Shaya, dash in the pasuk one way, and came Rabbi Akiva and dash in a different way. Now, I mean, it could possibly be that Rabbi Akiva is bigger because he's not bigger. It says, Skenim Arishayim. So, what do we see? Cleave in this brisa, that Rabbi Akiva came along and overturn the previous drasha of previous Sanhedrins. And there's another Gemara.
And you're saying Rabbi Akiva's based in over here somehow.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Rambam lists for Rabbi Akiva, certainly, if Rabbi Akiva's not a Bezdin, who's a Bezdin. Now, there's actually a similar Braisa that everybody knows. The Braisa is the Braisa of Ben Petura, which you all know in some Beis Aleph. Alright? Shanaim Shu Mahalchem Baderech, two people, some of Beis Aleph, Mom Metzia. Two people are walking on the way. Uviyad Echad Mem Kiddush Shamayim. One person has a flask of water. Im Shoysim Shnei, and both of them die, and both of them drink it, they share the water, they die, Mason, they die. Im Shoysim Echad Mem, if one of them drinks, Magiel Yishuv, and one of them drinks it, he'll reach the town, right? The other person will die in the desert, I guess, wherever they are. Dalish Ben Petura Ben Adosha, Mutav Shishtu Shnei, is better both of them to drink, V'yamusu, and die. V'al Yir Ech Mem B'misasa Shel Chaveru. Right? And in other words, one should not see his friend dying in front of him. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva came and said, believe me, what do we see? The same thing too. Comes Rabbi Akiva, I mean, the parshas of this drasha is, the price is similar to the price over here in Shabbos, the same form. In other words, it's mashma the Ben Petua had a drasha that was, I guess, accepted by the previous Sanhedrins. And came Rabbi Akiva, and he dashed it differently. So what do we see? We see over here two brises which indicate clearly that a latter Sanhedrin can overturn a drasha of a previous Sanhedrin. That's what we clearly see. In other words, in both brises, there's a traditional drasha that's made by previous generations, and comes along Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, and he changed the halacha. I want to claim this is the makor of the Rambam. The makor of the Rambam, that a latter Sanhedrin can overturn the drasha of a previous Sanhedrin, is that we see in these two places, in these two places, that Rabbi Akiva comes along and he argues on a drasha that was accepted by previous generations of Sanhedrins, he overturns the drasha and he makes a new drasha. What better raya could there be for the Rambam than these two brises of Rabbi Akiva? In fact, now that I've convinced you of my point...
How is this better than the case of Mishna saying it's to Amoraim?
Because in other words, this is a drasha.
This is Tanai making drashas.
This is Tanai making drashas. This is Tanai making drashas. A Amoraim are walking in smaller, and also true, even if a Amoraim are making drashas, but we know that they can make original drashas. Here, Rabbi Akiva is making a drasha with original din. Okay? In any case, right? In any case, I want to claim that it's mashma like this in a Mishna in Krisas. There's a Mishna in Krisas. In the third parak of Krisas, in Parak Amulai, there's a series of Mishnayos of Rabbi Akiva. There's a series of Chayas, Rabbi Akiva's argument, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shuatz, and there's other Mishnayos that they're dogs in Rabbi Akiva and the Tanaya. So the Mishnah, I'll pick the Mishnah I'm speaking about. It says Vavam B'Beis. Beis. So the Mishnah says Va'od Shaloi Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva asked. I think it was Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Right? I think it's Rabbi Akiva.
In the Itlis buying.
Right. That's in Tezvav and Aleph. Right. In other words, Tezvav and Aleph, right? I'm Rabbi Akiva Shalti is Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua Itlis. So there's a whole series of Mishnayos Rabbi Akiva asking questions. Now, what's Rabbi Akiva asking questions for? We'll see a little while. Rabbi Akiva is asking questions. So Tezvav and Beis, Va'oi Shaloi Rabbi Akiva Ashechet Heizavach B'chutz Ve'elam Echas. If a person shechs 5 animals outside the Beis HaMikdash, and he doesn't know, between each shechit, he doesn't find out that there's a Isser Shechitas Chutz. Mao, what's it do? Chayav B'chalachas V'achas, is he chayav and Shechitas Chutz on every single animal? Or Achal Al Kula, or is he chayav on one, on all of them? Amolai, is that the Lo Shamanu? We don't know the din. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, says Rabbi Yeshua, Shamati, I heard, but Oichel Miznever Echad, person eats one zevach mehei tamchuyin from, in other words, if he eats one zevach from Hein Tamchuya means from, in other words, the din is over here is that if he eats the, in other words, from Tamchuya, where they Tamchuya means when they give it, in other words, they'll give it the Kaihanim, Behelam Achas, they eats it, not knowing in between. Shelo Shu Chayv Kol Achas V'Yachas, Mishum Me'ila. He's Chayv Me'ila because of Me'ila. V'lo Yanish Advam Kav Chayv. If you use it, that eat the Kav Chayv. Right? Amab Shimon, lo kashlo shel Rabbi Akiva. Ela ba'oichol neiser Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Shimon says there's another question. Rabbi should give an answer. The same raya if he eats a zevach one from 5 tamchuyim, and he chayav kol ach v'achas, and he says a kav chayim. So Rabbi Akiva says to him. In other words, what does Rabbi Yeshua say to Rabbi Akiva? Like this, Rabbi Yeshua says to Rabbi Akiva that I heard Epis this dead. Of a person eating vacha, and with respect to what you're asking about shchutei chutz, it's a kaval chayma. No, it's a kaval chayma. In other words, and I think it's a kaval chayma. So comes, right? And I think it's a kaval chayma. V'rayim yishad v'am kaval chayma. Amar Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva says to him, Im halacha nekabel. If you have a Messiah, you know, it's a lachal Moshe Messina. Fine, I'm a kabel. V'imladin, but if you're making a kabel chayma, if you're making a kabel chayma, yes, tshuva. This is tshuva. Now, there is 2 ways of learning it. Okay, there's 2 ways of learning this. What is Rabbi Yeshua doing? You could learn in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yeshua heard the Shemua, and then, right, that, and right now, he's learning up as a Kabbalah Chayma. Or it could possibly be.
He himself is learning the Kabbalah Chayma?
What?
He himself is
right? In other words, but what is, in other words, I mean, it could possibly be. Rabbi Yeshua is saying, "Shemati beichel zever echa beheit hamchu be'el be'echad shu chayv kol achvar." V'lo yani shadvam kabel chayv. Okay, right? And he says that the question that Rabbi Akiva is asking is a kabel chayv from this. And in other words, it comes Rabbi Akiva, right? And Rabbi Akiva says, right, im halach in the kabel. If it's Allah in the Kabel, now what is he saying about Allah in the Kabel?
What's the other way of learning the Gemara?
Wait. I want to say, what is in the Kabel? Look, there's one way of learning it. In other words, it could possibly be that Rabbi Yeshua only had a Messiah on the Me'ila,
yeah.
right? But he saw there's a Kabel Chayim in the case of Shchutas Chutz. Okay? I mean, Akiva says, look, if it's halacha, the kabel, if ladin, yesh l'tshuva. What's Rabbi Akiva saying in ladin? He's learning a kabel chayma. What is Rabbi Akiva saying? Im halacha the kabel, v'im ladin, v'im ladin, right? In other words, he says, Im halacha, shekibalta mirabcha, shekayva kol achas ben azvochem, this kabel be mimcha. V'im ladin, she'ata alomed oisa b'kabel chayma ila yesh tshuva. Now, what do you mean if it's halacha? You have a kabbalah from your Rebbe. So, in other words, what does this mean? In other words, how is it possible that Yeshua? How is it possible that Rabbi Yeshua had a kabbalah on his Rebbe and his din? He says explicitly in the Mishna that he sees a kabbalah chayma. Could it be? Does everyone understand what my question is? My question is like this. My question is, Rabbi Akiva has a question. Rabbi Yeshua says, so they say to Rabbi Akiva, we didn't hear. So Rabbi Akiva says, I heard another din. There's another din by 5 tamchuyin, by Me'ila, and I'm making a kabel chayma to this din over here. Royani kabel chayma. So Rabbi Akiva says, if it's a Kabbalah, if you have a Kabbalah, says Rashi, if you have a Allah, you Kabbalah from your Rabbi, the Gabi the Shchut Nechot, find the Kabbalah. But if it's then, if you're learning from a Kabbalah Chayma, then there's a tshuva. Now, What's Rabbi Akiva asking? If Rabbi Yeshua is making a kal v'chomer now, so what was Rabbi Akiva's question if it's Allah in the Kaaba? He's making a kal v'chomer now. I want to say like this. When he says nearly kal v'chomer, a little bit different than Rashi, means Rabbi Yeshua said there was a halacha about Me'ilah, and he had a Kabbalah, and basically there was supposed to be the previous Sanhedrin, or he learned from his Rabbi, or a previous Besdin, made a Kal v'chomer from that. He made a Kal v'chomer from that. In other words, Rabbi Yeshua was repeating over. In other words, Rabbi Yeshua was repeating over. In other words, did he have this halacha l'Moshe Sinai, this din, or was this din being learned as a Kal v'chomer? So comes Rabbi Akiva and says, look, if you have a Kabbalah on something, fine. But if it's a din, right? Even though the previous Sanhedrin made that, doesn't make you a previous Sanhedrin, then yesh lahashiv. Meaning what? What do we see Rabbi Akiva is doing? Even though you, Rabbi Yeshua, you have a Kal v'chomer from this din, I can come and argue on it. In other words, if this is not a straight dispute between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua, it's mashma for me. I was mashma in the Mishna that there must have been a previous Sanhedrin, a previous psak that made a kal v'chomer. Rabbi Yeshua had a kal v'chomer from this, and comes Rabbi Yeshua says, "I can overturn." In other words, if you have a Kabbalah on this, then we see it's one thing. But if what? But if all you can tell me is that you have a kal v'chomer from Me'ilah, I can overturn the kal v'chomer.
What's the nearly?
What?
Rabbi Yeshua says nearly.
Nearly, that's the way they would done it. It seems to me that they were done it from a kal v'chomer. It seems to me.
It's a little reflevi.
I understand that, but then you have a problem. So what's he asking? What is it a din? Rabbi Yeshua says something in kal v'chomer now. Answer me that question.
But that phrase appears many times in Shas.
What? I know, involvement based on involvements. But we see who's making
it's like a rhetorical thing saying.
No, I understand that. And it could possibly, I could have arrived from my involvement base too. But the reason I'm bringing this is because we see that Rabbi Akiva is making this. In other words, it is true that on your involvement, my involvement base speaks about in Kabbalah the Kaaba by doing Adoimi. If not, then Yesh Lahashiv. But the question is, in other words, I mean, I picked this actually because Rabbi Akiva explicitly says like this. But I want to say, we have here a raya. Let me call this like a smach.
Also in Yevamos you would learn the same way?
Yeah.
You would learn that it's a previous...
Right, that's what I said. You know, if you're coming from a Kabbalah, if you have a Kabbalah, it's one thing. But if it's one of the Yud Big Midas, yesh lahashiv. Okay? In any case, right, what I want to say from this is that in fact, what do we see from this Mishnah? This Mishnah says that a later Sanhedrin, right, can be made shiv on the Midah of a previous Sanhedrin. Now, of course, you could say maybe a Kal v'chomer, is different. Than other meters, but nonetheless, you could make that. But of course, we see the machlokas on that. It's mashma according to Taisvus that all the meters, except for Gzeru Shem, are like a Kal v'chomer. The only thing I want to say is the following thing. I wanted to say that who was the Tana? Now I'm going out on a limb. Now I'm saying a chiddush. First of all, I want to claim the two prices here. You all agree with me? Is a makor for the Rambam. I want to say that this is an asmachta for the Rambam. So in other words, I'm not going to pay the Frankel edition, maybe the next Frankel Circle edition, they bring me from mishkafat.circle.com, a new makor for the Rambam. But I want to say, what the second chiddush that I want to say. Who was the person who initiated this judicial power that a later Sanhedrin could overturn a previous Sanhedrin? Well, I would maybe not initiate, but let's put it this way, who exercised it. I want to claim Rabbi Akiva. In other words, here in Rabbi Akiva, we have explicit examples in Sham. Even though the Gemara speaks of Yavamas doing Adam, this and that, but it could possibly be...
That's someone else, or that's anonymous?
That's someone else, but it's a Gemara with the shos and a gat, the shos, right, yeah, who knows, who knows, but
You said that's a precursor.
Right. It could possibly, I want to claim that it could possibly be that the Tana, who is Mechadesh, this notion of coming and arguing in the Midas of previous generations, right? I'm saying with great modesty, was Rabbi Akiva. which is very good. Why is it very good? First of all, that's the pshat. Klom and Pratim come from Sinai. In other words, we learned in the previous year that Klom and Pratim doesn't only mean, the pashtus of Klom and Pratim, as Rashi was one time based, and sorry, it meant that the Pratim the Halacha person the Chumash. But we saw in the Teres Kahanim, the Pratim meant things different from Teres Shmial Peh. In other words, on what basis can Rabbi Akiva say, I'm overturning your drasha? Rabbi Akiva can claim that this is the drasha that was learned at Sinai. In other words, I can overturn the drasha that you made yesterday because I claim that my drasha, since it's more established to me, that was a drasha that was made by Mishna Rabbeinu. So in other words, it's Rabbi Akiva's notion that the Pratim, the Teres Shmial Peh, was all Torah Sinai, is the essence of what I would call belatedness, a posterioriness, a posteriority is the proper English term to use, which will enable what the Rabbi understands is the judicial procedure by which a later Sanhedrin can overturn a previous Sanhedrin. That's Rabbi Akiva. In other words, I can make the claim that to overturn a drasha of previous Sanhedrin only if I claim that the drasha is to be treated as if it was made or was made at Sinai. That's the theological understanding of something like this. Because if it wasn't made at Sinai, what else make the overturn of the previous Bezdin?
Run by the alternative. What would Rabbi Shmuel say?
Rabbi Shmuel said no. Once we make the drashas and there's clear logical drashas, you have no right to come against the drasha. In other words, you're a later Bezdin. Why should you argue the previous Bezdin? The answer is what allows the second Bezdin to argue in the first Bezdin. The second Bezdin could claim that that's the proper drasha from Sinai.
The previous Bezdin was wrong.
Right.
They had the wrong drasha.
Right, or more accurate, say wrong, whatever. In other words, if I could claim, I would say that in terms of what's called Yeridas Hadeiras, how could a second generation, for example, let's say, in other words, for example, the Rosh Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Gimel, the Rishonim could argue in Goyim, if they could bring a right from the Gemara. That's what the Rosh says, okay? In Lamed Gimel and Alpha Sanhedrin. So therefore, what allows the Rishon to argue in the Goyim? Not because Rishon is greater than Goyim, because he could claim to a greater authority. He can claim the shots. He can claim that's what Ravashi meant. So in other words, Rabbi Akiva could say, right, why can I overturn the drasha of previous Sanhedrin? Because I claim that was the drasha that Moshe Rabbeinu heard, that he made. That was the part that was given Sinai. In other words, the theological basis of arguing on a previous Sanhedrin, in my opinion, can only be justified if I could say that really my drasha is the original drasha. My drasha is the true drasha.
Yeah, why can't, according to Rabbi Shmuel, the Klalim were Har Sinai and the Pratim were in Arvus Ma'od.
Why now? How can the Pratim are not Har Sinai? Because, in other words, there's a Torah, according to Rabbi Shmuel, there's a strict division between Torah Shmial and Torah Shmial Peh. The Torah Peh is derived from Torah Shmial.
Yes.
So there's a step. You go for Torah Shmial. Next step, number 2, Torah Shmial Peh.
And once it's derived, it becomes formalized.
That's right, it's formalized. But according to Rabbi Akiva, right? I'm telling you the Torah Shmial. That's the meaning of Torah Shmial. There's those two things, Torah Shmial Peh. That's the Torah Shmial. I'm claiming that this is the meaning of the Torah Shmial. Or I claim that this law was said at Sinai. I claim priority was said at Sinai. This is the way the law was said at Sinai. You misunderstood it. You lost the Messiah. However you want to say it. In other words, I can claim to argue on previous Sanhedrins. Why? Because I could claim that my logic came first. That's the logic of Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's the logic of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Where did it go in Midos?
What? That's exactly what he's saying. When he said Allah should be Sinai, the Shash V'daita, that's exactly what having Menachah is. In other words, Rabbi Akiva can claim that his halacha is halacha should be Sinai. right? In order to
We just
just
said we claimed that was the bemis, what Moshe Rabbeinu himself said.
whatever it is, yeah. In other words, I have to claim. In other words, there has to be some type of a belated, right? A posteriority, right? In order to say what I'm saying. Otherwise, why would Rabbi Akiva come along and change just the previous generations? In any case.
But what does it mean Moshe Rabbeinu himself didn't understand?
I don't want to go into that right now. However we understand, you understood it b'chush, you understood intuitively. In other words, it's not important how we understand it. The important thing is that if I say the Pratim and the Klalim was said at Sinai, which means every drush I'm saying at Sinai, so I claim that's theologically equivalent to saying that, right, that I can argue on anything that came out after Sinai. Anything that came after Sinai, because I claim that mine was said at Sinai. That's the justification. That's the theological basis of what I'm saying. So, the shiur that I gave, we spoke about in shiur number 8 last week, we spoke about this a prioriness of Rabbi Akiva, a posteriority of Rabbi Akiva. The belatedness, to use Harold Bloom, literary critic Harold Bloom's expression, the belatedness of Rabbi Akiva, right, is related to the concept that later generations can argue on previous generations. Because later generations will say, this is the drush of the Torah. This is the Torah. The Torah of Sab, the Torah of Alpeh, the Torah of Seder Sinai. And lo and behold, we see that the figure, the central figure in belatedness in Shas, is the same central figure who, as I have shown you, right, provides the Talmudic basis for the Rambam's psak that in a drasha, a later Sanhedrin could argue on a previous Sanhedrin. So in other words, the concept, or the judicial, right, mechanism of arguing on previous generations is merely another consequence of Rabbi Akiva's belatedness, which is a consequence of the fact that Rabbi Akiva holds the Torah and Torah are one and the same. Which is not, I claim, not like Rabbi Yishmael. And this is Rabbi Akiva, Achaba Rabbi Akiva. So we see that Rabbi Akiva makes this tremendous, called revolution, change in paradigm in the history of Midrashi Halacha, is that Rabbi Akiva holds that the Torah Shmiapeh is not something distinct from the Torah Shemiksav, and that, in fact, the Pratim were given at Sinai, and moreover, right, the later generations can argue on the previous generations by virtue of these two foundations. That's what I want to say. So we have here an incredible process in the Midos, an incredible process. What we have is let's summarize the whole series of shiur that we've given. This is the 9th shiur. We begin with perhaps, logical understandings, svaras of the early generations. Hillel takes these and places it into a text, which we call Yigul Midas, creates a Gzera Shava, etc., etc. Even a Kabbalah Chayim can become a Minyanav. In other words, we create a text. In Rabbi Yisrael, this text is amplified, but this text is a new logical text. It uses abstract vehicles, but it posits a distinction between the Torah and the Torah. The Torah is something derived from the Torah itself, the two separate components, right? And then there's a reunion. There's a reunion. The Torah and the Torah come back together again. They come back together in Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, in other words, first you have what Hillel's makabel from the previous generations, which creates the text of the Yigul Midas. It makes it scriptural. But then we have the Yigul Midas, which in other words, it gives it the level of scripture, but we make rules now by which we can derive things from the psukim, and the things derived from the psukim, the Yukul Midos, the way in which we derive things and create what's called the separate body of oral law. And comes Rabbi Akiva, and basically what he does is he affects a total breakdown of this distinction. The oral law and the written law just merge into one. The klal of prat klal, which is the epitome of a logical, descriptive system of sets, right? Rabbi Akiva breaks it down. He just takes two words, adds two things, and makes it totally scriptural. So in other words, in Rabbi Akiva, we see this incredible, Rabbi Akiva, in a sense, dissolves the Midas, and basically creates a dynamic creativity of Teresh B'Al Peh, which on one hand allows him to argue in the drashas of the previous generation, and that's the Makor L'Rambam. That's Rabbi Akiva. So we've come full circle in a certain sense.
Are we stuck now with the Stukim again?
So what's interesting is that why did Rabbi Akiva do this? In other words, I mentioned in shiur number 3 that, Hillel did this. Why do we need to create a text? Because the Stukim were not makabel, the Sfaras, the Das Torah of those who became beforehand. So we had to create a text. And then we have Rabbi Ishmael.
How does it help with them?
In other words, the Stukim didn't accept what we call the pre-Gzera Shava Hekesher. So then we create a text. We create it's a canon. The Gzera Shava becomes a new text. A rule that comes from Scripture. So it can't be a sale. It can't be a sale logically.
They claim Masorah.
Whatever it is, they claim that they disagree with it. So we claim that now we make rules that we learn things from the actual words.
Mm-hmm. They were saying it's arbitrary. We're saying no, it's not arbitrary. Right,
yeah. We learn we have everything from words. They would know. They would, if it's a svara, they can argue. Mm-hmm. But then, right, they can argue on svaras. But once we say it's two words, mm-hmm. we make rules so they can argue. They come outside the system. We spoke about this. Logical rules are assailable, but scriptural rules, textual rules, are not assailable. That's what we spoke about. Okay, comes Rabbi Akiva, right? And basically, according to Rabbi Akiva, we go back again. Now we're arguing with the previous generation. Now, we leave ourselves open to the tzedukah. We leave ourselves open to the tzedukah. So, I want to claim, right, is that this was a one-time thing. Now, based upon this, I want to explain a Gemara in Peivav Amud Aleph in Bava Metzia. Peivav Aleph in Sanhedrin. Right? The Gemara is Sanhedrin. That was maybe get a Sanhedrin. I'll be going on. Very good. The Gemara says in Peivav Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Stam Mastis Rabbi Meir, Stam Teisepte Rabbi Nechemya, Stam Sifra Rabbi Yehuda, Stam Sifrei Rabbi Shimon, V'kul Rolim de Rabbi Akiva. What's Kulim de Rabbi Akiva? Rashi says, "V'ma shalom to Rabbi Akiva Amor." And I say, in other words, the Gemara says, the Gemara Megillah says, Rabbi Akiva's Tamor. The Gemara says, I want to claim that Rabbi Akiva. Of course, there are Tanaim who make drushes after Rabbi Akiva, but the main body of Tanaic literature, as we know it, comes from Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva basically is the beginning of the establishment of the canon. In other words, Rabbi Akiva could have been left over to Tzdukim, but his Talmidim, quickly, after the generation of Rabbi Akiva, what did the students do? They created the canon. And then, that's Rabbi Meir, the Mishna. The law comes from Rabbi Akiva. After that, comes Rabbi, and what does he do? He's beside the Mishnah and creates now a new base of the canon, which is, as we've spoken about many times, the Gemara, which we refarish the Mishnah. In other words, Rabbi Akiva is already the beginning of the creation of a new canon, of a canon of Teresh B'Al Peh. Because the Derech of Rabbi Akiva, of course, cannot be continued that much longer. Then the Stukim will come along and say, well, we can argue too. So in other words, Rabbi Akiva, even though his methodology was to influence before him, nonetheless, this was quickly closed. Quickly closed, right. It's frozen. There was 2 generations and it's frozen.
So we have Hillel creating this new paradigm, which is Hillel is the basis of the beginning of the Tanaim. Then we have an expansion through Rabbi Yishmael and the Midas. Then we have like Hillel, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael codifies it. Rabbi Yishmael loosens it. Rabbi Akiva loosens everything.
Right.
His Talmidim come and then solidify it.
It's like the inflationary universe.
Right.
I think when it's like a big bang,
Right.
it's a very inflation, and all of a sudden it's frozen zone.
Right. Which happened then by Hillel and by
Right.
before Hillel and
Right, that's
before
it.
Rabbi Akiva.
And that's really that in my opinion is really the history of the Yugim Midas. Or the Midas, I think it's by it.
So the Midas really finished enough Rabbi Akiva, basically.
And Achan be right. In other words, and that's what the Stam Sifra is Rabbi Akiva.
Right.
The Stam Sifri is Rabbi Akiva. This is Sifri, but right, Stam Sifri is Rabbi Akiva.
Right.
In other words, Rabbi Akiva basically,
Even though it's Rabbi Yishmael, it's Rabbi Akiva because of this.
it's Rabbi Akiva because of this.
Right.
Because of Rabbi Akiva. In other words, Rabbi Akiva basically creates a new Torah Shabbat. Rabbi Akiva is over there. And that's it. That's it.
And Rebbe's the next generation after Meir.
Right, right. In fact, now here's what we spoke about. You know what base,
He
it's
saw it back.
relevant, it's back.
Right. He's just finishing off this process to
That's
free
right.
Rabbi Akiva.
Right. In fact, Rebbe is actually making the next 2 paragraphs, which is Gemara.
Right.
In other words, not only does the Torah Sheb'al Peh become become a canon, but it replaces scripture as the text of interpretation to be interpreted. Incredible. That's Rabbi Akiva. Anyway, Baruch Hashem, this gives us a overview of really the history of the time of the drushes from Hillel until really Rabbi Akiva, and finally his Talmidim, Rabbi and Rabbi, and that's the convocation of Torah Sheb'al Peh. Now, what's interesting, I want to just make one more important point, which is which we actually seen is interesting, is that the Gemara says in Sotah, we spoke about it in Testament Aleph, that Mishamesh Rabbi Akiva bottle covered Torah. So, Rabbi says, Rashi says he was Meisa Nefesh to be Deiresh to every ice for ice, and he brings from Rabbi Yishmael and Sanhedrin because of Avav. But really, what is the lashon of kavod Torah? So kavod, translated English, means honor. But it seems to me that the term kavod probably means, in other words, spirituality itself. For example, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Kodesh Baruch Hu, Hani nas kavedecha. Adi mekoim kavoidai. In other words, kavod means where God is. God's space, where God is. That's when we say that Mishameis Rabbi Akiva bottle kavod Torah. When Rabbi Akiva put the Torah Sheb'al Peh, it's the Torah Sheb'al. That's called kavod. It's a Kodesh Baruch Hu is there. That's kavod Torah. Rabbi Akiva who shows the spirit, the Rabbi Akiva shows the Torah Sheb'al Peh in every word of Torah Sheb'al. That's called the kavod.
Back in Har Sinai.
Right. That's called the kavod. Mina kavod. That's called Mishameis bottle kavod Torah. What does that mean, bottle kavod Torah? No one can do that anymore. Everything else now is just sort of like a likud.
No one did it before either.
Right. Well, maybe Moshe, whatever.
Moshe Rabbeinu.
What I'm saying is, Mishameis Rabbi Akiva bottle kavod Torah means that after Rabbi Akiva passed away, after his nifta, no one can do this anymore. All this Talmud did was balak the halachas that come as a result of this kavod of Rabbi Akiva that he created, that he showed. That's what it means, Mishameis Rabbi Akiva bottle kavod Torah. After Rabbi Akiva, then all this, then Mishna, Tosefta, it's all really sort of like consequences, footnotes, or likutim of Rabbi Akiva. that's Kula Malibid Rabbi Akiva. And that's Mishabes Batul Kavanatayah. So, we've seen in several places that Chazal, even in Agaditins, are not just telling us stories and facts about history, but they're giving us, in my opinion, the impoverishment of my opinion, giving us tremendous insight into really the development and the emergence and the process, the revelation of the Torah Shebe'al Peh from the Torah Shebe'al. Okay, we're going to stop over here. This is the end of the 9th shiur. And we still have not really discussed all the repercussions of this shiur, because we have a lot more to go, a lot deeper to go. But since we're running out of time, I want to wish everybody kol tuv hatzlacha from the undisclosed place in Yerushalayim HaKodesh. Until next week, be well. Kol tuv.